to hit record.
This meeting is being recorded.
And it's letting us all know it is being recorded. And good, we have a good chunk of people here. So welcome NYABJ to our business journalism panel. We plan on discussing today getting into the field of business journalism, personal finances, financial literacy, and the art of the side hustle. So like what to do, how to make your money work for you. Before we get into all that stuff, I am putting a link in the chat here. That's for NABJ's Business Task Force. If you guys are interested, that is the link. Get in there. It's with NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists. We are the New York chapter. So I'm Benita Salisbury, the president of the New York chapter. I am going to kick it over to Victoria L. Chapman. She is a member of our programming committee. She's also an award-winning and Emmy-nominated television producer, writer with more than 400 hours of broadcast programming to her credit. She has was a founding vice chair for NABJ's Art and Entertainment Task Force and in the 90s and has covered red carpets for E, as well as worked with BET, VH1. Victoria began her career, however, as a business journalist. So she knows what she's talking about here. That's why she's doing this. First as a staff writer for the Nashville Business Journal, then later as a newscaster / writer for Dow Jones and Dow Phone Division, and then as part of the launch team for CNBC. She currently works as a producer in post-production for A&E networks. So Victoria, I am going to mute myself and take my video off and let you take it over from here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Benita. And we have a fabulous panel, group of ladies to share their backgrounds in covering the business world and the importance of our covering the business world, as well as how we can start to navigate toward that, as well as a little bit on our own personal finances and how to move forward in that area as well. First, I'm going to kick it off with a quick round robin. Do I need to, well, we have Valerie Coleman Morris, Jennifer Streaks, and Diane King Hall, but I'm not going to go into all of your bios. You can kind of wrap that up a little bit yourselves in the process of answering. Starting off with a quick round robin. Valerie, can you give us a little bit about your background and what you've covered in the world of business?
My background is starting with the fact that I'm an Air Force kid. We call ourselves an Air Force brat for certain reasons. Not that we're bad, but that we're always in the midst of things. And so military life was my start in life. And therefore, I was a global citizen long before it was popular. I graduated from a university in Montana, having lived in Tokyo, Japan. That's what happens with military families. I went to school to become a doctor. I was a pre-med student. I had one chemistry exam, and I was a very good student, I flunked. And my professor wrote on my exam, you should follow your passion, because even though I didn't know any of the answers, I wrote a complete essay on why I thought socialized medicine was the way of the future. And I was going to be OBGYN and somebody else could do chemistry. He said that was creative and I should do my passion. He gave me a C. I changed from pre-med to journalism. If you want to know more, you can ask me more later, but let's round robin the other ladies.
Okay. Jennifer, how did you get covering business? Did you seek it out or did it find you?
Well, it actually found me. After spending most of my 20s in school, I have a JD and an MBA. I was working for companies such as KPMG and Legg Mason in their compliance department. And then when the housing debacle happened, there were so many people actually reaching out to me asking, what should we be doing? How should we handle debt? And I actually ended up writing for the Huffington Post, making several appearances on HuffPost Live, and moving on to US News and World Reports. And then that took me over to Black Enterprise, where I started covering the mortgage beat, how to buy a home the right way, how to handle credit card debt and deal with retirement. And the next thing you know, I was with CNBC. They sought me out and, hired me on the spot and wanted me covering women and money, culture and money, and credit card debt. And then I moved over to Forbes, where I did tech and money. Everything has a money bent for me. And now I am with Insider as their senior investing reporter, where I'm once again covering money, housing, credit card debt, and retirement.
Okay, thank you. Diane.
That's a neat question you asked about whether it found you or you found it. I think a little bit of both for me with regard to business journalism. A mentor of mine suggested I go into journalism. I had a very brief stint working in nonprofit work, and you can move up fast. And I was burnt out. And when I was a kid, I did want to be a journalist, and I'd gone away from that. And so she suggested it. I took a course at NYU, jumped right into it, and I did a bunch of networking to find my first job. And that's quotes, because my first paid role was as a summer associate at Bloomberg, which is translation paid intern. And the only reason I took that job at the time was because it paid. And other entry-level journalism jobs as an intern were not paying. So it found me, but then my heart fell in love with it at a certain point. And I see it as my vocational calling, because when it comes to our community in particular, I want to address the spirit of poverty within our community. So I am particularly passionate about personal finance. Yes, I cover kind of the, broad subjects within the world of finance. I've usually often been based down on Wall Street at the stock exchange. And have learned a lot, and I've learned on the job. I have a certificate in financial planning now as well. But just to quickly summarize, I went from Bloomberg to working for a production company with shows on employment on PBS. And then I freelanced for CNN and Reuters. And then I went to New York One. And in 2017, I joined CBS as the Money Watch correspondent, which that tends to be more consumer focused with some markets sprinkled in. So that's the short of it.
Okay, I'm going to follow up with you, Diane, but you can all piggyback. When you started covering business, was there anything that you were surprised to learn or that you didn't initially know or realize?
Everything. I come from a well-educated family. However, personal finance is a subject that we severely lack knowledge in within my family. For as educated as we shouldn't have, this is not like an entitlement thing. We shouldn't have been poor. I grew up poor. And I'm not saying that as I'm talking Ivy League degrees in my family. There's not enough knowledge about business news. So yeah, everything was new to me. Learning about, yes, I knew I knew the term stocks and, I knew some terms, but Bloomberg was one of those places that they have Bloomberg University and they just train you really on everything. So you're learning about stocks / equities, same thing, basically. And it helps just to kind of demystify the jargon that you hear on Wall Street. The other thing I learned from working on Wall Street is a lot of these guys are learning on the job too, so, I wouldn't be scared if I'm someone kind of thrown into that environment. I've had a trader come up to me before and say, hey, you got any ideas? He meant about what he should trade. He's asking me that question. In theory, he shouldn't be asking me that question, but that shows that people are just people. And so all of this is, new information that we can learn. So you're learning constantly in finance, whether it's stocks, bonds. Think about crypto. That's very new. Personally, I haven't even scratched the surface of that. I'm trying to understand that myself, crypto, blockchain, all that kind of terminology. So I would say, in the beginning, it was learning about stocks, which is something I know pretty well now. Now it's like trying to learn this whole new language about crypto.
Yeah, I would
Go ahead.
like to add, let me fill in just a little bit about how I got started. I told the story about going from pre-med into journalism and then paused because I think it's really important for everyone who is joining us in this conversation to know that you have two panelists who are steeped in money. They wanted to know it from a long time ago. You have great credentials. And then there's the journalist, period. Not financial journalist yet. So I had to learn everything on the job because the way that I moved from television news anchor, reporter to financial news was when Lou Dobbs called my agent and said, we're starting CNN Financial Network. He liked my work. He said, I have plenty of numbers crunchers. I need someone who can have living room conversations with people about money. That's what I do. So mine is the first step on the financial literacy food chain. That's what I do. And therefore, I'm able to do the stories that people everywhere are just saying, how do I figure it out? How do I do that? What do you mean about bank fees? And I think one of my favorite stories was the one that I did that had a banner that said, your goal with taxes is no refund. And I explained why. That's the way that I approach it. But I love to know the two sisters who are so steeped in what they did and how they built it. I think that is the critical sweet sauce to what we're all doing, which is speaking money to our community in terms and ways that they understand it.
Okay. Speaking of that, there are many different facets to covering business. Personally, I started out profiling business, people up and coming in the business world, doing top 20 lists. Who owns the block, different parcels of property. I then ended up with a transportation beat. And so there's covering industry, there's consumer, there's finance, there's startups, which is huge right now. Jennifer, what advice would you give to those out there looking to move into this field and find their niche?
Well, I think what you said about finding your niche is correct. For me, when everything started in 2008, I really started to realize that people don't know enough about money. And I even started to see that in my own family. And so I said, why are you underwater in your home? Why are you carrying credit card debt like that's a normal thing? Why are we still doing so much with student loan debt? And so that's sort of the path that I took. And that's really what I did when I first got to Black Enterprise. And so it was a personal move for me. I saw how I had a cousin of mine that lost their house during the whole housing debacle. And so for me, I think that if you follow what you're truly passionate about, it comes easy to you. I found that in my career, each step that I took sort of flowed to me because I was following what my niche truly was and what I was really interested in. And you see that in my writing. And so for anyone that wants to start on this path, I would say really think about what you want to cover, what comes easy to you, what you want to learn about, and what your voice is going to be in that area.
Okay. I also want to follow up with you because you indicate you specialize in putting a real face on economic issues. Explain that.
I think for me, breakfast table topics. Credit cards, how am I going to have groceries this week? Gas is going up, inflation, things of that nature. That is what people are talking about. The stock market is great. If you have money to invest, that's wonderful. But right now, when we're looking at inflation, increasing interest rates, gas prices, chicken and eggs are going up every week, people are not as focused on the stock market as they are in taking care of their own households right now. And so when I'm talking, whenever I've been on a television segment, I make sure that I speak to that segment of the population because no one is. When you turn on MSNBC or CNN, they want to say, oh, the market is volatile. And well, what does that mean? How do you break that down to the everyday person that says I'm standing at the gas pump and I'm paying $100 to fill up my gas tank. You have to break these concepts down to where the everyday person figures out how it affects them. Because if they don't think it affects them, they're not going to pay attention to it. When you see individuals that don't have enough in savings, it's because we have not communicated to them that saving is important, that you need to make saving a habit. When you see individuals that are walking around in constant credit card debt, it's because we have not communicated to them that that is not how you handle your finances. The goal is not to have credit card debt. That is not a normal thing. And so for me, it's really important that I talk to that segment of the population. And oftentimes there are people that look like me. And that's also why it's very important to me.
Okay, thank you.
Preach.
Okay. All right, Dan.
Sorry.
Now you report on an array of topics very early in the morning. How do you and your team decide which stories you're going to cover? And how do you get statements and interviews so early in the morning?
Usually get interviews that early in the morning. If we're getting an interview, it's usually recorded, say the day before or something like that, because I call it stupid o'clock in the morning, because usually what had been my time is I have to be in at, around 2 a.m. So it's difficult to find someone awake at that time. So if it's a statement, sometimes, you'll email the press person, you'll expect to get a statement later in the shift, or you can check Twitter. Nowadays we have social media, so you can check social media to see if the company put out a statement on social media, or if they may have even put out a statement on their site. Some of them do that now. So that's where you're going to find like a statement on something that happened. Again, if you're doing an interview, you're usually kind of some news, that it's going to happen. So you have an idea of like a report that's going to come out. So you may pre-tape an interview on the subject and kind of, ask the person that you're speaking to talk generally about the subject. And hopefully it still applies. If it doesn't, it's dead and you can't use it. And then in terms of subjects that we pick, it's usually what's top of mind for the day. We usually we'll hit markets, but generally we're not doing a deep dive. It's not CNBC. And then couple, like if it's a day an inflation report is coming out, you're hitting the inflation report. For me personally, I come from the angle that's similar to Jennifer. I try to break it down in consumer friendly terms. So I'm going to say not CPI. I'm going to say the cost of living rose in America. The cost of living shot up to the highest level in 40 years, so that people understand that's what we're talking about. When someone hears, now I think people understand the term inflation more, because once upon a time, people's eyes used to glaze over hearing that word. What does I used to not know what that means. What does inflation mean? I remember that is something my mom explained to me years ago. So
you just said CPI, so people may not know what CPI stands for.
People might not know what CPI stands for, Consumer Price Index, for anyone who's listening, who's wondering what that is. It's something that if you did become a business journalist or are already and are unsure of what that means, it's something that you want to pay attention to. It's a government report that comes out that measures inflation. It's considered the, most, it's kind of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Not the benchmark, but that's usually the one that's the main reference point. There are other gauges of inflation, but that's the one that they pay attention to the most. And we as consumers pay attention to that as well. So anyway, so it might be inflation, jobs report, or a weekly jobs report, whether it's the monthly granddaddy jobs report or the weekly jobs report. So that is, we're not spending all day on tickers. If it's a stock story that's consumer friendly, like say Peloton or Amazon, something like that, we're going to talk about that. We do talk about consumer stuff that I don't love as much, but it's a group effort. I don't love as much because I don't want to tell everybody, oh, run to the store, get the latest iPhone. Don't do that if it's not in your budget.
Exactly.
But we do have to hit on that it's coming out, So I'll stop there because I don't.
Okay. Now, Valerie, what's the best way for journalists to start building their network and gain sources for their stories?
Oh, be consistent Before they think about it, make sure you know what their sweet spots are and let them know that you are the one that has the answers to it. I think that it can go, I build community resources and they let me know what is happening in the community that is of concern to them. So my resources are oftentimes small business people, teachers, other people in the community who have a sense of what needs need to be purchased, and if they can't be purchased, how can they collectively be achieved. My background tends to be that education is the answer to almost any question that I have, and I try and encourage my listeners and viewers. I did both radio and television. So there was the opportunity to be able to say things to people more clearly, just like Jennifer and Diane were saying about you can't say CPI, or you can't say this without really explaining it. Radio helps you to explain things more than television, because television can sometimes say, here's the chart, here's the this, and then you don't necessarily do the due diligence that you need to make sure that that is explained in a good, comprehensive way. Did I answer enough of what you asked me?
Yes, but I'd like to see if the other ladies could weigh in a little bit on how you cultivate your sources and networks as well, just quickly.
Oh, okay. Well, right now I use social media, LinkedIn, Twitter is really good. If I have a story where I am looking for a specific expert, I might put out a call for it on either one of those networks. And I also rely on individuals that I've met when I was in my compliance days too.
Okay, Diane?
So I'll echo what Jennifer said about social media. I've found a lot of folks in finance on Twitter. They're huge on Twitter. And then also often working at the stock exchange, I can just grab one of the guys to talk about a subject. Or some of them I've just known for years. So I'll have their information and say, hey, can you meet me at the stock exchange, or can you do a Zoom now? So that helps. And it helps to cultivate those sources, because sometimes they'll reach out to me and say, hey, this journalist reached out to me, should I talk to them? So that gives you a little bit of I don't know the word I'm looking for. I lost for the word.
Insight.
I don't want to say power, but
yes. Influence.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
Okay, I know people are interested in actually earning money a little bit on the side hustle, but I want to ask real quickly. It can be hard for us sometimes as journalists of colors in the newsroom. What are some tips for succeeding or even getting promoted, getting ahead? Anybody? Any takers?
I think what's worked for me is being consistent. In my head, I always say, you're not going to outwork me. And that's how I come to any position I've ever been in. I mean, I've been up, like Diane says, she has to be in the studio at, 2 o'clock in the morning. I've been working on stories 4 o'clock in the morning. You've got to be that person that in their mind, they're going to call. They're going to know you're either going to get on the story or you have someone that can help them put together the story. You've got to somehow be that go-to person. Your work has got to be flawless when you're sending in articles to your editor. I've read a piece 10, 15 times just to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. And just being consistent, that work ethic and flawless work.
Any other takers? Okay. Now, like I said, in this economy, many of us want to make sure that we're growing personally. Can have you speak to the importance of having a side hustle or a second business?
I can.
Okay. Go ahead, and I'll add on after you.
Okay.
Okay. I think now more than ever, a side hustle is important, even if it's reading manuscripts, writing resumes, driving for Lyft. You know, that extra income is going to serve you well. I just finished a piece on building an emergency fund. And the first thing that you hear people say is, I don't have any extra money to save. Well, then maybe you have to make extra money. I mean, and that's what it's coming to. COVID-19 really showed us that life is unpredictable. You know, jobs are unpredictable. You may have to quit for whatever reason. You want to have extra income. It's really important.
And you wanna
So
back?
I'll jump in. Yeah. So gosh, what, this is probably, it's more than 10 years ago now, but when I was working on tackling debt, every kind of debt, including student loans, because often there's this concept of there's good debt and there's bad debt. Debt is debt in my mind, you know? And so I was working as a freelance journalist at the time, and I got serious about my personal debt because I said, I can't keep talking about this stuff and not actually be, so I'm being very transparent right now, be applying it. And so I just got really serious about paying off everything. There's a scripture in the Bible that really hit home for me. Oh, I'm gonna paraphrase it because now I don't remember. Basically, owe nothing to no man. And so I was like, everything. And so what I did any side hustle, so I was still working as a journalist. I was like, please don't let anybody know me. At the time, there was like no like Lyft or Uber yet, or yeah, it wasn't, because this was before 09, and I think they launched in like 09. And so just anything that I'm trying, I remember like my mentor, like he like had me babysit his kids one day. I was like, yes, I'll do it. He didn't have to give me any money for it, but I think also just being open to doing anything and being serious about it, like just brought me different opportunities. I mean, I was doing some admin work that was so humbling for me, and nothing is wrong with admin work. I think any, you know, legal job is worthwhile. Is absolutely worthwhile, but it wasn't what I wanted to do, you know. But I was like, but this is my bigger goal, you know, besides just being a journalist and working, and journalism wasn't doing enough to pay for everything. So I was hustling. And I think that helped me, not just in terms of yes, I got out of debt and paid off everything. I mean, I had even owed money to the IRS because of not paying, like, because I had heard somebody told me, you know, if you're freelance, like you can write off everything. That's not true. You cannot write off everything.
Right.
And so when I say I owed everybody, I owed everybody. Uncle Sam is the worst person to owe money.
He is the worst person to owe. Oh my gosh, it's like the mafia.
I was so scared. I was like, I'm gonna go to jail. I definitely didn't owe enough to go to jail, but I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna go to jail.
Okay.
It was enough to make you scared enough.
Yes.
To make those things of consequence.
Yeah, but I also had an epiphany around that time, because I remember calling the IRS and asking, you know, if I could be on some kind of plan. And I remember thinking right before I got on the call, you know, something like, oh man, maybe I'm just always going to be in debt. And I remember like just having an epiphany. I honestly felt like it was like, God, like, who told you that? And that kind of question changed my thinking. And the person I got on the line with, he said, and I was 1099 employee, and he said to me, some of our wealthiest clients are 1099. I love that he called them clients. You know, we're taxpayers. And it just really shifted my thinking and made me, because I think it starts with a thought. You know, you have to think differently about this, you know, so not just covering the subject matter, but applying the knowledge that you're gaining to your own personal life. So side hustles are important. Whatever it is now that you can, you know, do to make extra money, do it. Like Jennifer said, Lyft, Uber, you know, sell some stuff on Poshmark, you know.
Yeah.
Why not?
You know, I want to get back to the freelancing a little bit later on, but just something you said real quickly. Dr. King said, no work is insignificant. All labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be
That's
undertaken
right.
with painstaking excellence.
That's
So
right.
there's no shame in whatever work game you got going on. Valerie, for those who don't have a second job or time to work or create one, what's one of your most important personal finance tips?
Well, a couple. And if I could just make a comment on side hustle, just so people know, speakers bureaus are also a side hustle that can be extremely lucrative. So I just wanted to make sure that I added that. The other thing that was a little side hustle that helps is anybody who's really good with QuickBooks, make sure you put that out there. It's always a really good thing to do ahead of tax time, because then you can enter QuickBooks for a person. They then, it's 20 minutes worth to send and get your taxes done. So those are just two little quick little side hustle things that I thought would be relevant. It's important to me that I mention my epiphany in money. Two things. One, when I came back from overseas as a kid and I tried to buy a soda and I didn't know American money. I knew pounds, shillings, and pence. And I remember my cousins laughing and pointing at me. And that was the point that I said I would never, ever, ever be embarrassed about money again. So that was a huge thing. The other thing was the mindset side hustle is what I have focused on, because I'm retired. So as you all are talking about in the midst of your careers and, LinkedIn and all of those other things that I did, I pulled back from those things so that I could then focus on what I call my rear view mirror mentality about money. And that is making sure nobody ever runs past an opportunity for education. And this is based on something that my dad said to me. He would always say, Valerie, what's wrong with looking in the rear view mirror? Nothing is wrong with it. But what happens if you look in the rear view mirror for too long? Everybody would think he was talking about you'll have an accident. He wasn't. He was talking about you will run past opportunities because you're working with the mentality and mindset of what you knew, what you thought you didn't know, or what you think you know now. So the rear view mirror is kind of my way of looking at personal finance and hoping that that at least sets people, whether you are a consumer of it, you're a narrator of it, whatever it is, make sure that those things are in your mind so that you can positively move forward, enriched and not falling for the okie doke.
Okay. All right. Diane, I'm going to double back to you about freelancing. What are some tips that you can give for freelancers in managing their income, especially if you're in like a feast or famine type of circumstance?
So in your feast period, you have to save. That was where I learned the hard way initially, because when I started freelancing, I got a ton of work, and then I hit famine zone, and I hadn't experienced that before. So if you're getting a ton of work right now, for anyone who is on this chat right now and you're a freelancer, save. Save more than the 10%. That, it's kind of the rule of thumb. Make sure you're also setting aside money for your taxes. And, make sure you're setting aside, you should set aside, I don't know what your tax bracket is, but definitely set aside more than 10% for your taxes. And I would say, you have to, number one, you want to have your emergency savings set up. You want to save at least 3 months of living expenses. But if you're freelance, ideally you want to go to 6 months, just in case, because, hopefully you won't be between jobs that much. But let's say you're getting, 1 day a week or one assignment that just lasts you a certain amount of time, and then it's dry the next month. You want to make sure that your bills are covered for the next few months ideally, if necessary, because, you know, if you're freelance, it can be feast or famine. And when you hit that famine zone, if you're not, you don't want to have to be setting up a GoFundMe. You know, we don't want to do that. Ideally, I'm not saying that that's, well, I prefer us not to have to do that. Just, you know.
Understood, definitely.
I mean, I understand people hit hard times. All of us have had hard times in life, and that happens. And, you know, you may need to go to family or whatever. You do what you need to do. But once you have this knowledge and once you're getting work again, save as much as possible. And I know I think we're going to get to this later, actually. I'm going to hold off on that. But save is my biggest tip. Save more than 10% for during your feast.
Well, we are going to, I do have a question about that. And Jennifer, are there any resources or programs that you think are good for saving or goal setting?
Well, the first thing that you have to do before you even think about, like, really good app is Mint. They really help you track your money and your spending, but you really have to sit down and create a budget. That is first and foremost, and really figure out how you spend your money. You will see your relationship with your money in black and white if you sit down and just create a budget. You're honest with yourself. You see what's coming in, and most importantly, what is going out. And then that way you move from there. Once you create the budget and you see how you're spending, you see what you're wasting money on. Are you eating out 3 times a week? Do you have Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, you know, just the whole list of these, you know, apps and whatnot? You will see where you can cut spending so that you can save more money. So your first and foremost thing to do is to create a budget first.
Okay. And Diane, doubling back to you, members interested in investing, what are some tips that you can share?
So I would say make sure you're taking, if you're staff somewhere, make sure you're taking advantage of your 401k or 403b. Make sure you're, you know, investing in that. And if you feel like if you're worried about, this is what I usually recommend. If you're worried about like, how am I gonna, you know, you feel like you're taking home less. I mean, yes, you are taking home less, but you're preparing for the future. So start with a smaller percentage. You don't have to start with the 10%. I know that is the rule of thumb, but I like to tell people that to start kind of building the muscle, because just like going to the gym, you have to build the muscle. So start with the percentage that's going to at least get you the match from your employer, and then add another % the next paycheck, and then add another % the next paycheck. So that way you don't feel the sting as much, you know, as if you haven't been doing it. And then just make sure you max it out if you have been doing it. So invest in your 401k, your 403b, make sure at a minimum you're getting your company match. If you don't have that, I recommend doing, whether it's an IRA or a Roth IRA, just pick one. To me, it doesn't matter, just pick one, you know, and you can start off small. You don't have to have this, you know, just a buttload of money to start with that, you know, to start investing. I'm not going to do individual stocks like recommendations. One, I shouldn't do that as a journalist. Number two, you know, you have to be careful with that, because if you're not like a stock picker, day in and day out stock picker, you can get burned. You may have your great, you know, you may have your really bad one. So I'm not going to get into that. If people want to play with that, that's, you know, that's, you pick that based on what your personal plan is, your trajectory. I do believe it starts with what Jennifer said. You know, you need to have a budget, and then at a minimum, take advantage of your company matching your 401k or 403b.
Okay.
And maybe do an index fund or something like that.
I agree with all of those things. I also think it's important that you identify what your triggers are for spending. Oftentimes it can be very emotionally motivated, and we've all probably done it. You know, you feel real bad, something bad happens, don't you want to go out and treat yourself to something? So I always suggest that, yeah, give yourself a small controlled treat, but understand what your spending triggers are. When it comes to investing, yeah, we can't say what stocks people should buy, but I will say, what do you use? You might look at those companies as, if you like the product and others like the product, it may be worth looking at that. incremental works. I think that it's important also that we not feel we have to know everything there is to know about it. Know what is important for you personally to know, and then expand a little more. So if we're talking the individuals, those of you on the call who are individually saying, what can I do? But then those who, as journalists, are going to be writing about those things, it's similar, incremental works. Take a small sliver of something you want to explain, and I think people can digest that better than saying, here's the whole pie, and you need to know it all. Because what will happen is if we don't change that mindset, I think people tend not to do anything at all because paralysis analysis will get you. Instead, make one step.
It seems too big otherwise. Now, when it comes to tax time, are there any tips or tricks that we should know about, Valerie?
Oh, absolutely. The number of people who say, I want a big refund because when I get a big refund, then I put it in savings. How much of that ever reaches savings? So I think it is really important to try and not owe anything and not get anything back. You can make those adjustments, go in and look, talk. This is the other reason that I say people need to spend money in order to make money. We all need financial advisors. I don't do all of this on my own. I don't have all of the answers that I need. So I think it's important to find the right financial advisor who can help you reach the goals that you have set and the goals that you want to reach. Other than that, paying it forward. What you know, share it with somebody else so that it can spread the wealth.
Okay. One quick round robin before we open up the floor to questions. Everyday people don't often think business news matters, at least not to them. Please explain how it does, why it's important, and why it's important for us as Black journalists to make sure we are in there and telling these stories.
Okay.
Jennifer, I see you.
Well, I think I will say with minorities, I think for so long they didn't see enough of us reporting business news. Number one, representation matters. Also, when you realize that business news is important, how it affects your money, it does affect your everyday. And once you realize that, you start paying attention, you start understanding how to make moves with your money. You might understand how to start a business of your own. And it really does it can put you on a path for financial independence. I mean, it's one sort of an example are the PP loans that came out during COVID. Everyone ran to get these PP loans. I think that there was, sort of like a lack of understanding, and we're going to start seeing the fallout from that. But when you made this information available to everyone, you had so much access. You had people that had legitimate businesses. You had African Americans, minorities that had legitimate businesses that were able to access this money and keep their businesses afloat during a major pandemic. Business news is important. It impacts everyone. And I do think we need to keep moving with the diversity and inclusion endeavors and making sure that representation matters and that there are more of us reporting on business news, because once they see more of us, they will take the fact that it is important and that it affects them.
Okay, I'm not sure if we lost Valerie. Diane.
So I do want to echo what Jennifer was saying about representation matters. I think that helps someone who is watching or reading something that we're writing or talking about to say, oh, that person, okay, let me, they look like they look like me. They come from my community. Let me actually pay attention to that. I think that has helped. I think that the industry could do better about representation, like to Jennifer's point about the DEI initiatives that we're seeing. I love that they're happening. I'd love to see more application of it. There needs to be more of us in these rooms. I like when I go to events that bring together journalists and then business journalists as a sect of that, but I still feel like there's not enough. And I noticed that, for instance, when I'm at like the Financial Follies, there's not as many of us in the room, so Pre-pandemic, there seemed to be more, but I don't know if we lost some during the pandemic. But I just think that the industry could do better about that. And I think that why it's important is it does affect, they say follow the money, and you can find, the reason behind, say, human trafficking. It's money, so there are subjects that you think don't affect you, and people are paying attention a little more once again now. It's usually when there's some kind of pain point when people start paying attention more, like the Great Recession, the pandemic, and and then now what's happening with regard to inflation and how it's affecting food and gas. But what's interesting, Jennifer, that you talked about earlier with kind of talking to the average person. I was watching an interview on CNBC the other day with an executive from Walmart, and he was talking about how 6-figure earners are now shopping there. That shows you that the rise of inflation, lack of a better way of expressing it, is affecting everyone. It also shows you that, again, everyone is affected. And I think our industry could stand to benefit from even more diversity, see more, Black journalists in the room. And I think seeing us helps, but we can do better. We don't need to be, the only ones in there.
Okie doke.
Come on.
Got some questions
Anyone who's in
coming
the chat who's thinking about it, come on in.
We've got some questions. First one, what's the best way to become financially literate? Many of us have never learned in school. How can we educate ourselves?
Reading and watching different news outlets. Even if the terminology is unfamiliar to you, pick up the Wall Street Journal, watch the business networks, watch CNBC, watch Bloomberg. Again, the more you hear the terminology, go to Investopedia and look up words. Analysts do that. They literally go, I know, I've been around these Wall Street guys enough to know they literally, if they don't know a word, they're going on Investopedia.com to find out what it means. So you go on Investopedia, you hear a word, write it down and look up what it means. Just like when you're learning, just vocabulary growing up, you would look it up in the dictionary. So just watch and read. That's what, when I first started in the industry, I would just watch a bunch of, well-known business journalists, and you just start reading these papers. I liked marketwatch.com. I feel like that's very consumer friendly. Business Insider, you guys are like a lot behind a paywall now, so it's more difficult if you're a struggling journalist to access that. Once you reach your paywall on one news organization, if you haven't paid for the service, move on to another one. That's my tip. It's a frugal tip.
We're getting down to one article a month these days.
Exactly.
What is this? It's ridiculous. This is up in one day.
Okay.
And the budget, what Jennifer said about keeping a budget, that's one way to become financial. That's the basic. You don't even have to use an app. You can use pen and paper.
Pen and paper.
And sorry, you guys, it got really dark, so I'm going to turn on more than my ring light here. Just bear with me.
Well, I'm going to move on to what are some of the best, some business websites that you can recommend? You mentioned some publications and news outlets, but
I would definitely say you should have blackenterprise.com. That's where I really started, and especially being a minority, it's going to break down why this matters to you and our community. I think every day I'm on the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Insider, of course. But if you just really want something to start off with, I would definitely say blackenterprise.com first and foremost.
okay.
And I would just add the Market Watch, because I think that's consumer friendly. They do stop. I think they stop at 9 articles. I think that's their cap. It may be less now. It may be less now. They may be one of the 4s now. But yeah, that's one that I recommend that's very consumer friendly. And they're not like, that it's not preaching the Kool-Aid of CBS. They're not a part of CBS anymore. They used to be part of CBS, but they're not.
Okay. Now, we've all heard today, they're talking about student loan forgiveness, extending it. What does that mean if one has student loans?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're gonna have to
Okay.
fill out the paperwork and submit it, and then they're gonna review, one of them is 20 grand if you use the Pell Grant. The other one is 10,000 if you make under 100 and, what is it, $25,000 a year. So I think it's gonna take a while for everyone to really, for it to flesh out and for the process to really be totally revealed and made simple. You know how it is when something first rolls out from the government, it's going to be truncated and hard, but eventually it'll, we'll figure it out, and you just have to fill out the paperwork. It's not like, I doubt that Navient is going to just call you and say, hey, you're eligible. They're probably not going to do that. Okay. You're going to have to stay on top of it and get that benefit for yourself.
If you're
Okay.
eligible, do it. If you figure out, like,
Yeah.
I've seen that, like some of the qualifications, but just check and see if you match the qualifications. If you do, I know, I've seen some people complaining about it's not enough. It's something, so take advantage of it.
Mhm.
Excellent.
Exactly. It was 0 yesterday. Okay.
Valerie, I see you're back.
Hey, everybody.
I know you have a book, and I think you also have a radio bit.
I had a radio podcast for many years. It is still on my website, which is valeriecolemanmorris.com. But yeah, my book is It's Your Money, So Take It Personally. And it talks about all the things that we forgot during the recession. Those things like having a budget, making sure that you don't spend more than you make, understanding that you need that 3 to 6 months of, liquid money, not something that's tied up, but that money that you can access. It also talks about basic things on ATMs, foreign ATMs. I remember I had to do a whole chapter almost on that when it was the number of people who were saying they didn't realize or didn't understand why choosing a bank, you need to know what's near you, what has ATMs that you can use. Otherwise, you're spending money to get your own money. And it talks about retirement. And it suggests that retirement be something that you start thinking about in your 20s, not in your 60s and 70s, because it is that magic of compounding, but it is also your dedication to saying, I'm putting something aside for me, for my future all the time. So again, even if it's a small amount, in my book, I say in your 20s, start saving for your retirement. Start putting aside a certain amount of money. Because if you start thinking that way, then I think you will act that way.
Right.
Okay. Any other, quickly, round robin, book recommendations?
Book recommendations. Smart Women. I would say there's a really good book. It's on my shelf right now. It's called Smart Women Finish Rich.
Mhm.
And it's targeted towards women. There's a high percentage of single women that, once if they're divorced or their husbands die, they retire in poverty. And so I think that, financial education that's targeted towards women is also a good thing.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of David Bach books, and himself is really, I like him, cool person. I've always liked Susie Orman. I know some people say, some of her stuff is dated or, but the principles are there.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes people think that Susie, is chastising, and that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
I think you have to find your own. I would like to throw out Lightbulb Press. It's a fabulous series of books, and they really are the Cliff's Notes of finance. Lightbulb Press, written by V. Morris, but it's Virginia Morris, not Valerie Morris. But I had her on my shows many times, and they just are spectacular books, and all under $20. and about 60 pages with diagrams and all of that. It answers all of those basic questions. Great library.
Okay, we're down to the last 5 minutes. Any quick final words? Quick round robin.
I will.
Yes.
Black is beautiful, but being in the Black is necessary.
Mhm. That's great.
That's the thought I'd like to leave with everyone, because I think far, far too often we don't remember the importance of being stable and having financial emancipation. So Black is beautiful, but in the Black is necessary.
Mhm. I would say invest in an emergency fund. If you leave this Zoom and you start one thing, you take one tip, it would be that you can start per paycheck, even if it's $25, $50 per paycheck, it adds up so quickly. Put it in an account that you cannot easily access, something that's not, that's liquid, because that's going to give you comfort during hard times.
So I don't have anything as eloquent as how Val put it, but I
Mhm.
do agree with kind of both the sentiment of both Val and Jennifer about just having an emergency savings. I know some people, for instance, some people follow Dave Ramsey, which he talks about like, tackling debt first. And I do think that is very, very important, but you do want to have a little bit of a cushion, just in case an emergency happens. So, I mean, because emergencies do happen. I mean, there are deaths in the family, medical issues, a car breakdown or something like that. So you need something, I know we say 3 to 6 months, but just start with at least a month,
Mhm.
and then, create a budget so you can start tackling your debt and your emergency savings. You don't have to do everything all at once, pick whichever, you know, g- road you want to go down. You can pick one, you can pick the other. It doesn't matter. You can start on one road, switch to another road. Just stay on that road to financial freedom. Because it will be both for you and you're creating a legacy for your family. And there will be speed bumps along the way and setbacks, and that's okay. Just get back on the road.
Okay, I want to thank you all. You have just shared so much wisdom and knowledge with us. I want to encourage all of us to look at business news and the work that's being done around us with new eyes. And the numbers have real meaning in our lives, and we should be mindful of what role we can play in sharing that information and telling these stories to our community. Thank you so much, ladies. Benita, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say as we wrap up.
No, nothing at all. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. This is NYABJ's Business Journalism Panel, and we will see you guys hopefully at our general body meeting in September 14th, 15th. I don't know, but it's on Instagram and everywhere else. So make sure you find it in there. And have a great rest of your evening, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
for joining.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us. Thank
This
you,
has been a great
Victoria.
conversation.
Okay.
Wonderful.